Good afternoon once again, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today on our March edition of our modernization webinar. So starting this year, we started hosting a webinar monthly to discuss with our stakeholders the recent happenings, progress of the the IDD modernization program as a whole, and this is our fourth edition in general and third for the year. So today we will be introducing this monthly edition, and we'll be welcoming everyone and going further to talk about the modernization programs, project health and timeline, and discussing different topics with us today on eligibility, level of care, versus support needs, service planning, and also walking us through a diagram that shows what the the current state of LOC is and what the future state is. We will be passing it on to Robin Lohman, the Assistant IDD Director, to discuss proposed service in focus today, retirement and leisure day services. And Seth would be taking it back to take questions and provide closing remarks. And we ask that, as this progresses, as we've commonly done in the past month, if you have questions, put it in chat, and we will try to visit those questions at the end of the presentation. And we will also provide you with an opportunity to ask your questions, come off mute and ask questions at the end of the presentation. During the course of the presentation, we do ask that you stay on mute or try to keep your mics muted to avoid any interruption. With that said, I'll pass it on to Seth to introduce and start this webinar. Seth.
Yeah, good afternoon. As Brutus stated, I think a lot of you might be familiar with my face already, but I am Seth Kilber. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Long-Term Services and Supports Commission here at KDADS. Brutus, I did just real quick want to flag for you too. Are we able to pin the interpreter top?
Yes, I will search for her now and awesome. Our ASL interpreter is now being spotlighted, so thank you for being here, Amanda.
Yes, thanks to Amanda. Okay, so yeah, without further ado, we'll kind of kick it off because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get to any questions folks have. So this is something we might kind of keep up as we do these monthly webinars, just so people can, kind of level set and see where we are with some of these initiatives. The MFEI, which is what we're going to be hitting on today, is on track. We are looking good with a go live of July 1st, 2025. But I think we'll kind of get into what some of the outstanding pieces that we still have to figure out will be after that July 1 go live date. Unbundling of day services, that is still being talked about and in progress. We are looking at a July 1st, 2026 date, no sooner than that date at least. Same thing with conflict-free case management. There are some contingency things that we're working on there with stakeholders, and that's still to be determined. Then of course, the much anticipated community sports waiver. We were really hard at work on developing that still, and we're on track again for a late spring, summer 2026 implementation timeline there. And then after that, we've got a handful of different grant opportunities with some of this time-limited funding with through the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we're trying to infuse into the system to help providers come into compliance with some of these initiatives that were initiated. So I'm gonna, we really thought about what we wanted to hit on with this webinar, and we felt like it was worthwhile to sort of take a step back on level set really for folks really interested in how this really gets intersected with what you all know to be the system, right? So sorry, I'm just gonna pause a moment. If you're off mute, do you mind just muting yourself? It's just want to make sure we're thank you. So with on the eligibility versus support needs process in Kansas, we say eligibility a lot, and it's not always clear what we mean when it comes to eligibility. So I thought it would be helpful just to kind of briefly give an overview that the system eligibility, particularly if we're talking about IDD services, is referencing eligibility for Kansas IDD services. Now, I won't get too far into the weeds here because there are those who have been around and in the system much longer than me and can speak to this in a much more eloquent way than I can. But the way I understand it is, back in the day, there were a lot more funding streams for individuals determined IDD eligible in Kansas. It wasn't just a Medicaid HCBS waiver. Now, for better or worse, that's really been condensed down into HCBS. And so that's where we're talking about program eligibility. So this is just determining waiver access. Are you eligible for the waiver? Do you have kind of the requirement, if we perform a level of care assessment, do you come up over that bar to gain waiver access? Then there's also a financial eligibility component. And I know several people or a lot of people are familiar with this, but this is really just determining Medicaid eligibility because in Kansas you do have to fall under a certain income threshold to actually be eligible for the financial eligibility piece of Medicaid. And then kind of once you've ticked off those first three eligibility boxes, that is when we get into the service planning component of the waiver. And this is what is determining kind of those specific services that you want and need and how they will be funded. So that's kind of the high level overview, and we want to kind of dig into a little bit of that next. So here we have two columns here. On the left side, we're looking at just the level of care eligibility piece. So it was in the previous slide, that was kind of that program eligibility line. So on July 1st of 2025, the level of care tool will be the MFEI, and it will be the process to determine if an individual qualifies for the waiver. In Kansas, an annual level of care assessment is required to make sure that somebody remains eligible for that waiver. So again, to restate this, the purpose of that level of care LOC eligibility determination is really just a simple binary yes or no, not a tier determination. However, we know under the current basis assessment system, level of care also has been assigning support tiers. So those two things have historically been braided together. However, those tiers have influenced service planning, often blending eligibility with the support allocation. So even though LOC is done annually, right now, we do have an opportunity by using kind of a research-backed, validated tool to review this process with CMS and potentially reduce this assessment component for individuals who have more stable support needs. And the MFEI is the vehicle that will allow us to be able to assess and hopefully be able to do that in the future. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got the service and support planning functions. So again, once you are eligible for the waiver, yes, you're waiver eligible, but what does that mean? So that is where the service and support planning comes into play. So this is really focusing on identifying the participants' goals, strengths, and support needs. And so once you've qualified for the waiver, your level of services and support needs should determine those specific services that are required and the scope and intensity of those services. So do you need 10 hours a week? Do you need 30 hours a week? Some people need, 24-hour round the clock care. And then as well as the resource allocation components as well. How much funding is the provider going to need to be able to actually provide those supports as identified in your service and support plan? So because historically KDADS or the state has linked this tier-based planning to a level of care scores, it's created this overlap between the eligibility and the service planning elements of these two distinct processes. Another thing worth flagging is that in the Kansas IDD system, support needs for the two really big services, which is those day services and those residential services, are linked to the assigned tier from the eligibility assessment. And we know that the basis assessment has been both deficit based and acuity based. So why does this matter? The MFEI is really about replacing the deficit-based basis. So we don't really want deficit-based tools to be informing person-centered planning. Although it's been a system that has been working, and I'd say maybe working in kind of air quotes, it's not necessarily accurately reflecting to the and mapping to the actual support needs. So we're really trying to move the system in a way that promotes equity, transparency, and kind of that true person-centered decision making, while also aligning our waiver with federal compliance requirements for Medicaid HCBS, which a big component of HCBS, really bedrock to HCBS, is person-centeredness. And CMS is also encouraging the state to use, validated research-backed tools, which the MFEI, ticks both of those boxes. And then through this implementation, we're able to enhance resource allocation methods versus, some of these older, outmoded basis tiers, and move into a more data-driven allocation model that again will really tie together that person-centered planning initiative that we're also undertaking. So this is the slide. We spent a lot of time on this one, and we've heard folks really wanting kind of more of a a chart or a graphic to help with some of the visual elements of this, and we certainly want to be able to incorporate more of these in the future. So hopefully this isn't too confusing, although I'm sure some of you will let us know if it is. So I'm going to start at the bottom here on the old the old methodology, or well, it's still current, existing today. And you can see at the top there each entity responsible for each one of these functions. So in the top, we're focused on CDDO. CDDOs conduct the basis assessment. That basis assessment, as I said, has been tied to the level of care based tier. The basis also, now moving on to the KDADS portion, gets, so let me back up here. The CDOs conduct the basis assessment. They enter that basis assessment into the KDADS system. The KDADS system then spits out an eligible score with a level of care based tier 1 through 5 on it. So you get either a tier 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 if you are eligible for the waiver. That then flows into the very next, yep, there you go. The very next rectangle there and is a function of both the MCO and TCM, and this is the service and support planning functions. So this is where you get your person-centered service plan and your person-centered support plan built out, and the basis tier score and the basis assessment, for better or worse, is really braided into both of those documents. From there, you are entering into receiving basic HCBS IDD waiver services, and that is you know, where your community service provider is actually providing the service to you as dictated by your person-centered plan. So that's how it's existing today. With this new implementation of the MFEI, and this is one where there's some to be determined element. So, you know, we'll kind of get into some of that. But the MFEI, again, will be only determined by the CDDO. It will come to KDADS and to the KDAD system, and it will spit out a yes or a no. You are either eligible or ineligible. Now we are into the TBD, to be determined part of it. And this is where we've got essentially two options, because the MCO TCM is still going to be conducting those person-centered service and support planning. Another change by implementing the MFEI is that MCOs will all be utilizing the same tool to do that, some of that service planning, which is the Enter RAI. And then from there, we'll continue to go into inform the plan, and community service providers will be rendering the service. Now, where we've got in orange, the dashed lines, is kind of what we're wrestling with now. Is, do we, after implementation, do we try to implement a tiered based system based solely on the MFEI, or does it somehow live with a blend of the MCOs and KDADs on a more complete data set with the full Enter RAI, and come up with a needs-based tier off of that? So those are in a nutshell kind of the two options that are still to be determined. But as we know more and as we figure out more, options, we will revisit this in the future. So if I can distill this down to some key takeaways, it would be that eligibility or the level of care LOC will be conducted by the MFEI IDD tool, which determines whether or not an individual gains access to the waiver. That MFEI data will influence, but not necessarily determine, the service planning elements that are done by in collaboration with the MCO and case manager. The service planning, one of the core assessments will be that full inter-RAI. And if you've been on any of our other ones, I apologize if I didn't state this earlier, we'll use inter-RAI, which is what the MFEI, there's a lot of data elements between both of these that are overlapping. So the MCOs will use the inter-RAI assessment to help develop that individualized service plan. So it is really going to tailor those services based on actual support needs, goals, resource allocation models, and we'll be able to assess that across all 3 MCOs, which is something we don't have that capability at this time because all 3 MCOs use a different service planning tool. So in short, you qualify for the waiver first, and then those services are planned, and then we figure out the support intensity, the funding allocation, and you know, the reason for that is to ensure that providers are being reimbursed based on the actual need of the person rather than kind of a preset tier score. So that concludes my focus on the MFEI and the level of care service planning component. I'm going to kick it over to Robin, and then we will open it up for questions.
Hi, thanks. Gosh, that's a lot of complicated material to try to understand, but you did a good job on explaining that. And yeah, I'm Robin Lohman. I'm the Assistant IDD Director, and I'm here to go over retirement and leisure day habilitation. This was one where we originally had a age, but we removed the age because we recognize there's certain individuals that do need a calmer environment and a carefully structured environment in those scenarios. Service overview. Retirement and leisure day habilitation services are for retired participants or those who need or want a less stimulating environment. They're designed to enhance the quality of life for adults by providing structured, meaningful activities and promote social engagement in a calmer environment. They also aim to support participants in maintaining their independence and well-being while offering opportunities for personal enrichment. The core components include peer engagement, participating in recreational activities, and fostering a sense of belonging and purpose. Social connection activities designed to help participants build and maintain friendships. But one thing I definitely want to highlight is senior-related activities and hobbies. That's something that's in our current IDD waiver. It calls out senior-related activities, so we wanted to make sure we're continuing that service on. Health and wellness services may include physical activities, wellness program, and access to activities that contribute to a person's physical and mental well-being. Enrichment. This service offers a range of regularly scheduled activities to promote a sense of accomplishment, personal reward, and contribution. These enriching experiences focus on enhancing adaptive capabilities, productivity, and independence. They should have the opportunity to engage in meaningful pursuits and must provide a supportive environment that fosters a high quality of life by prioritizing participant well-being and enrichment. Okay, and here's just a couple kind of case examples that might apply for this or might want to participate in this specific day habilitation. Marcus is 72 years old. He has moderate IDD and mobility support needs. He did used to work at a part-time job in the community through a supportive employment program, but of course, he's retired. He was bored at home and needed some structure. He also was facing some memory challenges and required assistance with transportation and community integration. So the plan for community integration would be participate in volunteer-based activities such as delivering meals to senior centers, some social engagement options like a men's group that focus on storytelling, music, and history discussions, health and wellness, taking part in a modified physical activity such as walking clubs or seated movement exercises. And then person-centered goals include staying active and engaging in a structured day program tailored for older adults, maintaining social connections, and continuing to contribute to meaningful community activities. And the outcome is that he would be able to remain socially engaged and continue to contribute to the community. He has experiences that improve his emotional well-being due to the structured environment, and he feels valued and included, reducing isolation. Okay, and then we've got Lisa. She's a younger gal at 38, and she's got mild IDD, but she also has significant anxiety. And she's been in day services for over 30 years, but she's struggled with loud noises and change. That really increases her stress levels. And she was also recently diagnosed with early stage arthritis, making physical demanding activities difficult. So the plan would be to transition from traditional day services into a calmer, wellness-focused environment, and where she can engage in creative and structured activities that help manage her anxiety. The person-centered goals would include enrichment and well-being of participating in music therapy, meditation, and maybe some relaxation exercises, joining a small group discussions and art-based workshops to stay socially active. And for health and wellness, taking part in low-impact adaptive movement sessions to manage arthritis. And the outcome would be that she would be experiencing reduction in anxiety and improved emotional stability. She's able to build new friendships in a smaller, calmer setting, and she feels more comfortable and engaged in daily activities.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Robin, for that. Oh, Seth, go ahead, please.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, thanks to Robin again, and I think that finishes up the presentation portion, and so I guess we'll open it up to questions.
So, looking at our chat here, and I think we have one hand up. If you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and I will call on you, and you can come off mute and ask your questions. We will also be picking questions from the chat. And awesome, Cami, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, please?
Thinking about, Robin, what you just presented, I don't know about other parts of Kansas, but in Sedgwick County, we have like 4 or 5 senior centers throughout the community already established. It just seems like that some of the persons on the waiver could access those, and then they would be integrated with non-disabled peers and could participate in that way. I don't know if that's something under consideration or something to be explored.
I mean, I'd have to look at all the scenarios, but just offhand, it seems like it would be a good thing for them to participate in.
I'll look into it more. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Cami. And one question from chat from Melanie Jacobs. Now that we've decided that all documentation will not be needed, what will be required for parents and guardians to obtain each year?
Well, Melanie, we're still working with the CDDOs, you know, because I think there are some CDDOs who don't feel comfortable fully saying they're not going to accept any documentation. So we are going to get kind of a standardized statewide expectation around that. piece. And we also want to get out some additional, resources to families so that they know what to expect going into these meetings. Initially, or after a while, it'll become second nature, but we recognize that kind of going into in those first initial meetings, that there's a lot of unknown and what to expect. But again, the core thing that the MFEI is doing is just that simple binary yes or no. Are you eligible for the waiver or not? But that's been something we've been having a lot of discussions with CDOs and other stakeholders on the documentation piece, and understanding that parents need a little bit, and families and providers as well need a little bit more understanding about what that expectation is, because it is a pretty big pendulum swift.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Seth. And a follow-up question to that, before I call on Cami, is, that there's this concern about loss of services, or reduction, in terms of services after transition to the new system. What safety nets are in place to prevent unintended service reductions?
So there's a couple different ways you could think about this. I mean, we've already stated, we don't anticipate there to be anyone losing eligibility. And so if that does happen, we've got some mechanisms in place to, reassess them under the old basis, and kind of compare from that standpoint. We've also got grandfathering in place for those who are currently in a tiered service to retain their tier until such time that we've got a more finalized resource allocation methodology on essentially how are those rates going to be reimbursed based on the support needs. Now, if somebody's resource needs or service planning needs do get reduced based on this new tool that the MCOs are utilizing, there is a mechanism for them to follow a grievance process through the MCO to have it kind of looked at from essentially an appeals process, and that's something that is still that exists today. So if you have your service plan meeting today, and then the MCO is saying we're going to give you half as much services as you're used to, we would expect you to follow that appeals process with through the MCOs, and it continues to go up from there, potentially up to state fair hearing, those sorts of things. But the promise of this, again, like I said, is us being able to kind of assess this network adequacy from a data-driven lens, and be able to compare MCOs on how they are assessing and where those outcomes on the service needs are landing, to make sure it's being done consistently, and it's removing some of the subjectivity from the process.
Thank you very much, Seth. Cami, do you want to go next, please?
Okay, so you guys are all awesome and you're doing a great job. I just continue to be so very confused. Now I hear you saying the MCO tool, which I keep asking, what the heck is that? And why can't we see it? Is it a mystery? Is it a secret? And then if the MFEI is just saying yes or no, you qualify for the waiver, then why is it being presented as something that is more tailored and strengths-based and deals with goals and blah, 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 when I see absolutely no questions on the MFEI that have anything to do with the person's interests or goals, nor do I see it as particularly strengths-based. So questions I keep asking over and over, and I got in a little late, so sorry if you already answered it, but I'm just really, really wanting and hoping at some point it can be explained to us what the heck the NRI is, what are the MCO tools, because we're all scared. We are. This is going to come up over and over again. Parent guardians are frightened that the MCOs are going to deny us service or deny us the same level of service that we've had in the past. So we're just looking for some reassurance, please.
Yeah, Kemi, I want to be able to provide that reassurance. I don't know. Was there a specific question in there that I can maybe tackle
I
for
know,
you?
wasn't that
Yeah.
fun for me to just ramble and not ask a specific question?
I think that's fair play, because that's a lot of what I do sometimes. So
I just want to know what the tools are that you keep referencing, the MCO tool, the additional tools, but I think you don't know either. Is that right, that you don't know either?
the MFEI,
Right.
we know that tool, right? So that
Yes,
one's,
yes,
yeah. So I
yes.
guess I'm hearing the question is what the MCO tool look like? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of, so there's a lot of duplication. A lot of the same like if we were to take the MFEI and tell the MCOs, and this just happened, they were blind to the data that we've collected from the MFEI. You're going to go sit down with your MCO care coordinator, and they're probably going to be asking some of the same questions that you just got asked. So we're working with the MCOs so that they have access to the MFEI data and actually streamline some of their assessment questions. But the full care planning tool is what the MCOs are using. So it looks like the MFEI. It looks very similar. It's just additional questions, and I'm thinking through my head how we can maybe get some more clarity for you around this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are the additional questions? Yeah. You guys don't know yet. The MCOs aren't telling you either, Seth.
Well, no, we have it. I think we just would probably do a little bit more of a kind of a crosswalk for you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Next, I think we have Shelby. Please come off mute and ask.
Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. I got confused again. On one of the slides, it indicated the retirement and leisure, and the example was the 38-year-old participant transitioning from traditional day services. When we had one of the unbundling work group meetings, it was indicated at that point that the retirement and leisure was now the current day services. So I'm all confused again. Help me understand what we're talking about.
Thank you very much, Shelby, for that. Robin, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
I'm not remembering that specific conversation, but my interpretation, my meaning in, traditional day services is just kind of what's happening now. And this is one of so it could be a variety of things, right?
So can you verify then, because I just want to make sure that the English I'm saying is the English you're saying. You had sent the email that no, guys, you're freaking out about the wall lists, and we never intended to do away with the current day services. So when my question during the unbundling question was, so did retirement and leisure, is that the new heading on facility-based day services with community opportunities? And I was told yes at that time. So I can see Cami nodding her head because I think we're both on that same group. So I just want verification, because I'm telling my parents what you all are telling me. And so I just want to make sure that I'm repeating correctly what that is.
I guess maybe I don't know. I'm just gonna back up a little bit and just say that I don't know if the heading of day services, like you said, but in my mind,
I just mean on paper
providers,
right now it says day services, and now it will say retirement and leisure. That I just mean the title.
I think maybe I'm picking up a little bit of what you're asking here, Shelby. Like, so you bill T 2021 for day services right now,
Yeah.
right? So the question is, once we unbundle, what service definition will be T 2021?
You got it. There you go. You're the hero.
And,
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know that we have the answer to that question yet. So I think it'll depend on what the finalized service definitions look like before we start attaching actual service codes or billing codes to the services themselves.
Okay. I just, at some point we need, because people took a deep breath and stopped being worried about, I have to be out of the house. If I'm getting day services, I have to be out of the house 5 hours because I don't live with my mom and dad. So I have to go someplace. And so people took a deep breath when we're not doing away with what your current offering is. So we need to know, what is the title of the current offering under the new unbundling system? So every meeting we seem to kind of go like this, and it makes people go a little nuts. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Shelby. I'm glad that we could provide that clarification. And looking into chat, we're seeing some questions here. So yes, Shannon raised a good question about whether other types of day services, the proposed new services, will be talked about more to more extent. And I'm assuming that you mean that we'll be presenting these services to you as well as we just did with retirement and leisure rehabilitation, but please feel free to come off mute and make some clarification. But Robin, are we going to be discussing these other services as well to more extent, do you think?
I believe so. I think every one of these meetings we were going to highlight one service, right? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, correct.
So I think we've done,
awesome.
This is the second one. I think we did life skills.
This is the second one, yes. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, there are other opportunities. Like what we're doing right now does not undercut, the engagement that will be done before an actual waiver amendment is done as well, right? This is a just stakeholder engagement to get your feedback. There's still a lot of engagements to come down the pipes. Let's take other questions. Shauna did ask, how is the final rule going to affect those scenarios?
Shauna, can you maybe come off mute and expand a little bit on your question? Because I think that is a good question we could talk through.
I just was thinking about, if you're asking the person what they want and maybe they aren't necessarily capable, like, for example, my son can't say, I want this, I want that, or I don't want, and as far as he does well in a calmer setting sometimes, but he also does well going out to the library or trying various outings in the community, swimming at the Y and that kind of thing. But I also understand with the final rule, if they don't want to go and do things, you don't make them go and do that. So what if that's part of their plan that we've developed with with their day center and their guardian and their targeted case management, that, you know, part of it will be he goes on outings and then he chooses not to go every time. I mean, so is that's what the final rule is, correct? I mean, it's basically, or what if he decides he doesn't want to go to his day service every day? Or, I mean, what do you, I mean, because he's basically like a toddler in an adult body. And it's, how do you help them be successful and challenge them and have new experiences and have that enrichment, and not just not go and participate in the outings and just, you know, how do you do that? What is like?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's yeah, you kind of nailed, I think, kind of the core tenet of the intention behind the rule is it's got to be flexible for the person,
Yeah.
you know, and it comes down to increasing the opportunities for engagement doesn't mean increasing forcing that person into engagement opportunities.
Right.
And so then that's where we really have to do a better job. The other side of the rule is it comes down to the person-centered planning process, because that is ultimately that's the fulcrum on which the rest of the HCBS system is resting upon. So it's those plans need to really clearly articulate what the person wants, what they need, what's important for them, what's important to them to live their best life. And then it's the provider's role to then do their very best to follow that plan and adhere to it and allow them to have those opportunities, but not be a barrier to those opportunities, I guess, for them.
Right. And his day services program does a great job of encouraging him and giving him two positive choices. You know, do you want to go to the library and find a book, or do you want to go to the library and find a DVD? Or, you know, they do a good job of encouraging him and giving him positive choices. And he still can say he doesn't want to go, but I also know that sometimes he needs like behavioral supports when he goes out. And that is something that I think is a need that would help us at home and like going out in the community and the day center, the different providers. Is that something that's going to be, you know, those services, or is that part of the, I mean, because those scenarios sound absolutely great. And that would, you know, that's a good thing to shoot for. It doesn't always turn out that way. And I guess the needed supports need to be there and adequate providers available. So I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I guess the behavior support piece is the piece that would be, is that going to be available or help provided to help people do some of these, you know, outings?
Yeah, you know, it's all kind of, it's all interconnected, you know. So it's not just that unbundling into distinct service categories solves the piece that you're talking about. And it's not just that better person-centered planning then lets providers know kind of the triggers and how to best support somebody in the event of, you know, behavioral health crises and whatnot there. And it's not just that move into new tiering funding methodology will solve. So no one initiative is kind of the magic bullet cure all. It's really how do all of these shifts and components to some of these modernization elements support the movement towards, you know, providers being able to adequately provide the support in kind of a settings rule compliant way, and how can we kind of unwind some of these systemic things that have been around for decades that are just outdated and outmoded and aren't really conducive to the movement towards what we're really trying to get at, is more individualized supports. And so there's a lot of challenges around that, and I think you've highlighted some of them very well. But I'd reiterate that we don't have a magic bullet solution. I don't anticipate in my time at the state ever being able to say, well, we've got a little bit too much money in the system. We've got too many providers wanting to offer services. So that's kind of always going to be the case. I think just the reality of the world we find ourselves in now.
Right.
But it's kind of how can we move the needle? How can we make some progress and grease the skids so that we can could continue to make progress on all of those things, and so it's just kind of one thing at a time a little bit.
Yeah, and absolutely, I think you were right, and it needs to be flexible, and it needs to be fluid, kind of sometimes changing based on their needs, and but also open-minded in ways to encourage them to do some of the things that are not necessarily in their comfort zone.
Yeah, and each plan should really be individualized. So forgive me, I think you mentioned your son. So your son's plan, I would anticipate and I would expect, looks nothing like Cammie's daughter's plan. And so each one of those, depending on what they look like, are going to have their own limitations, right? Like you could say, like, hey, I want to be a professional baseball player. Well, there's probably some limitations to that, at least for me anyway. Right. And so it's kind of then through that planning process, you're identifying what some of those barriers are to living that preferred life, and then you're talking through the strategies and well, what's maybe the next best thing, or what's kind of one small thing we can do to move in that direction. So yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's got to be adaptable, flexible. It can't be, we can't really have these one size fits all models, and I'm not saying that's what we have today. But it's definitely a line that we're towing.
Yeah, I think so. It would just help. Well, I know it would help me to just kind of see what it means for my son, like these changes. What does it mean for him? And sometimes I know change isn't always easy, but it may be better. And I hope that is. I mean, obviously your goal. I hope that that's what it ends up for him and for all of our folks. It's just the unknown, I think, and not being able to visualize what it means for your person.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. We do need to get a little bit better, and a little bit might be generous towards me on explaining what the end benefit is to the actual person receiving those services. What does that look like? And so you definitely take that feedback. I appreciate kind of the engagement.
Oh, no, I appreciate you guys being here and letting us ask the questions. That's great.
Awesome. We're doing on time here. Before we might have just one more opportunity to take one question, but before we do that, I want to remind everyone we have a bi-weekly open office hours. We can't answer all the questions here because we have to prepare a presentation, present, and give you opportunity to ask. But come to our open office hours. Any questions that you have relating to anything under the modernization program. Now, MFEI, the service planning piece, the grants, community supports waiver, come to the open office hours and ask your questions, and we'll be more than happy to give you more time to more engagement there. But there's this question in chat that is gathering a lot of steam that I want us to quickly address. This is a timing question, Seth, and this, I think, it segues into what you've discussed earlier around the interconnectivity of all of these programs. This looks at the timing of the grants, the definitions of the unbundled or the proposed new services, and the idea that perhaps rate setting should have happened earlier to allow for smooth setting of the grants and all other interconnectivity. But do you want to speak to how all of this interconnects and the challenges that we're having to navigate to bring all of this into success?
Yeah, my skills at making the stars align are woefully not present. I'm working on that, but I do hear that concern as well, and I share it, to be honest. But I think the thing I would maybe point out right now is there's a lot of states who have had to unbundle, been told to do this, and haven't really had that ability or opportunity to offer grant opportunities to providers. So that was kind of the choice we made, knowing like, hey, the timing here isn't right, but we have some time limited funds. So if there's some movement that we can make towards that end, we want to be able to infuse some funding for providers to make some potential changes here. Understanding that, yes, there is not a final definitions out there, but we feel that if there's work that you can do that supports kind of the crux of the settings rule on working on providing more opportunities, more integration, more autonomy for those you serve, that it will be in line with one or more of the service definitions. And so that's, I guess that's maybe where I would maybe advise providers now is do you feel that there's ways that grant funding could support you in making your services more in line with the settings rule? Is there a way that this grant funding could allow you to go a little bit above and beyond what you're currently doing in that regard? And then we would certainly encourage you to do that.
Awesome. We are now at time. Thank you very much, Seth, for that response. Thank you all for participating in this month's webinar. We do have our bi-weekly open office hours. Please come on there and ask your questions. We will continue to engage. We will release our newsletter, which mirrors most of what has been discussed today. But if you have questions, send them in. Thank you all once again and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All right.